Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you all from Brussels. Today's last lecture of the NATO Foreign Ministers session was the NATO-Ukraine session. The NATO-Ukraine session means that we discuss the situation after the Ukrainian war with the Ukrainian foreign minister. I have to tell you that the European allies still have a strong war strategy. As you can see, the European allies needed to send new weapons, new large sums of money, and new sanctions. They also needed to introduce new military aid packages. It was a long time ago, however, that I heard a statement from the NATO Secretary General about the war, that it could not continue like this, that it could not continue the killing of people, that it could not continue the destruction of cities. Finally, we hear the NATO Secretary General talking about how good it would be to be at peace. This was not the case before. I would like to thank President Donald Trump and the new U.S. administration for all the peaceful efforts that we have seen over the past few weeks. I would like to thank them for setting up direct dialogue between the United States and Russia. Of course, this does not mean the end of the war, but it means that the risk of escalation of the war has become much lower. Therefore, compared to the past few months, the world has become a safer place. I have heard a lot from my colleagues that the Russians need to accept the ceasefire without conditions. This is what my colleagues say, who have been criticizing us for 3 years, attacking us and provoking us. Because for 3 years we have had a ceasefire. The ceasefire is peace, the diplomatic channels are open, and we have had a ceasefire for 3 years. And now, 3 years later, with the admission of President Donald Trump, all this has come true. We have seen for 3 years that this war can only be put to an end by an American-Russian agreement. Therefore, we welcome all American-Russian consultations, and we are happy to hear that Kirill Dmitriev, the head of the Russian Direct Investment Foundation, is now in Washington, which is the first high-ranking Russian visit since the outbreak of the war, a new positive sign. The U.S. Secretary of State has said that they are committed to their peace efforts, and we Hungarians are committed to supporting American peace efforts as long as it is necessary. And I have to tell you that we are proud that we are the most committed and loudest supporters of American peace efforts within NATO, and this will remain so in the future. We are also grateful to the American administration and President Donald Trump for pouring clean water into the glass and putting an end to Ukraine's treachery of being a member of NATO. Of course, the Ukrainian NATO membership would lead to the outbreak of World War III almost immediately, and Hungary, of course, will never and will never support this. We are especially proud and consider it a great success, and on the road to peace we see an important milestone in determining the energy infrastructure against the threat of attacks. As I said at the NATO-Ukraine meeting, the energy infrastructure leading to Hungary has been attacked several times during the war. The attacks have often been carried out under the guise of friendship, and the Ukrainians have also proudly declared that they were the ones who were attacked. There have also been attempts to attack the Turkish nuclear power plant. There have been several days in recent times when the oil transport to Hungary has stopped, so our expectations are clear. We do not take any responsibility for the war, and we do not take part in it. And since we are the first ever electric energy providers in Ukraine, we clearly expect that they will not attack the energy infrastructure leading to Hungary in the future. To put it more clearly, they will not attack the coal and gas pipelines leading to Hungary. We consider the security of energy supply to be a matter of sovereignty. The United States and its President Donald Trump's peace strategy is being pursued. And this peace strategy is supported by Hungary. Among NATO member states, in the most decisive, in the most committed, and in the loudest way possible. Well, that's all for now. If you have any questions, of course, I am happy to answer them. Thank you.
Mr. Prime Minister, I have several questions for the Prime Minister. One of them is that this was the first NATO Secretary General meeting where the new U.S. administration represented itself, so you can feel the change within NATO in terms of issues and power relations. Then it is also related to the NATO Council that Marco Rubio talked about the fact that the defense spending of member states should be increased by 5% of the GDP. What would this mean for Hungary? Is this target setting feasible, even in terms of the other member states? And Hungary has just announced that it will step out of the International Criminal Court. Was there a resounding vote in the NATO decision? Thank you.
Patricia Plancher.
I would like to ask a question about foreign policy. In the light of the U.S. sanctions, what will the Hungarian foreign policy do in the future? Andrew Nemeth, Her TV. The Prime Minister said that Hungary is the most vocal and committed supporter of the U.S. finalist policy. Has this increased Hungary's current position in the NATO alliance? This would be my first question. The other question is that the representatives of the Indo-Pacific are also present today. And I know that there were discussions about the Western Balkans and the Indo-Pacific. What can we learn from these discussions? Thank you.
Thank you. Marton Boglarka said that this is the first NATO foreign policy meeting in which the new administration, represented by Marco Rubio, will address the United States. And since the U.S. foreign minister is usually the first to speak, the tone was a bit different than it usually is. Marco Rubio spoke clearly and directly about the U.S. administration's commitment to peace. and he painted a very realistic picture of how peace talks can look like and how a peace agreement can look like. I don't want to interpret his words. I don't have the authority to do so. But since the members of the U.S. administration have spoken about this several times before the public, I don't think there is any reason for me to say that they also made it clear that a peace agreement was created based on the permissions of each and every part of it. Peace agreements are usually signed in such a way that one side fulfills all the conditions, while the other side does not. Unfortunately, there have been a few such agreements in the course of history, but this is probably not going to be the category. It can also be felt that the European allies, when the U.S. foreign minister is present, do not allow themselves to make such a loud noise as when he is not present. So there is quite a big difference between the European Union and the NATO member states, that is, among the members of the Foreign Ministers' Council, and those who usually speak at EU foreign ministers' meetings speak differently there than here. So when the U.S. foreign minister is here, he is not as brave as the U.S. president or government, so the tone is completely different. Our position has changed so much that what we have said so far, now even the strongest player says the same thing. So, there is the joke when the mouse and the elephant cross the bridge, and the mouse says, "Dumbo, did you hear that we are knocking?" So when the biggest one says the same thing as we do, then obviously it puts us in a completely different position than before. In other words, the free world got a new leader, and the political strategy that they have tried to push to the margins, to be seen as extreme, as an island, has become the mainstream. So we are back to the main street of history. And that mainstream, what we say, is undoubtedly a new feeling. As for the defense spending, I think it is a completely legitimate expectation from the United States that if this is a North Atlantic, Euro-Atlantic type of integration, then everyone, even Europeans, will give in to it. So the expectation is that Europe will strengthen its own capacities, spend more on its own security. I think from an American point of view, it is a completely legitimate assumption. Now, how will it look like in 100%, if I am not mistaken? If I am not mistaken in terms of meetings, one thing is certain. NATO still has 7 members, which cannot fulfill the 2% GDP rate defense spending obligation. There are 4 members of NATO that just reach 2%. There is one that does not have an army, so 2% does not count here. I will sum it up. 7 plus 4 plus 1 is 12. We are a total of 32. So that means, for example, a member state of 20 out of 32 can move 2% at all. So it will be difficult for many people to make a big leap from here, but of course everyone will cope with it. What I want to say is that I think the American assumption is legitimate. We will see how mathematics can be evaluated here. Of course, in part, these expectations also played a role in the European rearmament, or military industrialization strategy, which was called REARM. As far as our exit from the International Criminal Court is concerned, no one brought this up at the meeting. But I saw that more and more people expressed their opinion on the issue during the day. Somehow, I did not experience this obligation to express my opinion when Finland, Poland, and the Baltic states announced that they would step out of the ban on footwear in last year's agreement. The events of the past few weeks. I did not see this obligation to express my opinion when Lithuania, another ally of ours, announced that it would step out of the Dublin Agreement. So here I see a bit of a selective obligation to express my opinion on the part of our allies. It seems that if we step out of some kind of international organization, it affects our foreign neighbors. If NATO members step out of very dangerous arms ban negotiations, they will slip away. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. But I would like to emphasize once again, as I said in Budapest earlier today, that we do not want to be part of a politicized and politically degraded judicial system, which also brought an anti-Semitic decision. So I think the only right step that the government took was to initiate the step out of the International Criminal Court and the proposed law, which we submitted to the Parliament today. Now, as far as the Indo-Pacific area is concerned, I would just like to say that we are naturally happy if the Indo-Pacific Defense Alliance also raised ambitions in the Pacific. But we would not like to forget two things here. One, that we are a defense alliance, so a defense, not an attack alliance. When I say defense alliance, I mean the defense of our own territory. The other thing is that we do not support the idea that NATO should become an organization that is opposed to a given country. I am speaking in Hungarian here. We do not want an anti-China NATO. NATO was not created for this purpose, and we would not find it appropriate to take such a direction. Finally, I would like to say the following about the agreement signed by the President of the United States yesterday. Of course, the United States is still one of our most important trading partners and one of our most important investment partners outside of the European Union. We are committed to maintaining this cooperation. I would like to make it clear that the European Commission made a very serious mistake by not having started negotiations with the United States in the past few months. I think it would have been easier. The European Union applied a 10% VAM, while the Americans only applied 2.5% in the case of American automotive imports. We should have applied 2.5% VAM there as well. This would have created a situation that would have been a serious basis for negotiations. The European Commission did not do this for some reason, and here is the result. I hope that in the coming weeks or months we will be able to reach some kind of negotiation solution. We will continue to work with the United States, and we will continue to cooperate with them in the most efficient way possible. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being here, despite the late hour. There will be a new meeting tomorrow at 5 p.m., where the representative of the European Union will also be with us. This will be followed by a two-way meeting with a colleague from Ukraine. It could have been last week as well, but it was postponed. We will see what will happen tomorrow. This is how we plan it now, and then I look forward to seeing you again. Thank you to the participants as well for following us. We wish you all a good night